MJ, you and your colleagues have some reporting on the mood behind the scenes. What are you hearing from your sources?
Well, Boris, there's certainly been a lot of confusion and anger and sadness inside the White House, across the administration, the campaign, and across the Democratic Party more broadly since the president's really halting and shocking debate performance. My colleagues and I have spoken over the course of the last 2 weeks to dozens of Democratic sources, including, I should note, senior Democrats who have spent real time with the president and in some cases have known the president for years. And what has been striking is that none of them had ever seen this version of President Biden that we all saw on the debate stage that was so faltering and dazed. And plenty of officials that we spoke with said, look, of course, we've known that the president has aged. He is certainly not the same person that we know from, say, a year ago. But what they had said, and that was so noteworthy, is that they said they couldn't have possibly known about the full extent of the president's decline. And what many of them blame at this point is this apparatus and daily operation that is built around the president that is so painfully choreographed and stage managed, they said, that is designed to prevent the president from being often out in these unscripted settings for an extended period of time. And that really what that meant was that only a small circle of inner circle of advisors and perhaps family members could have known about sort of this full picture of the president's condition. Just one example that is in our story is that according to two sources, before cabinet meetings that the president attends, cabinet officials will submit their questions and key talking points and bullet points that they plan to present to the president in these closed-door meetings. This is how one source described it. They said the entire display is kind of an act. They would come and say, hey, the president is going to call on you about 25 minutes in and ask this question: what are the bullet points that you'll respond with? Now, the White House's defense has been that that is standard practice for any administration. They said in a setting like this, you never want the president to be not aware of what is going to be discussed. They want to also just be mindful of the president's time. But we also spoke with sources from the Obama years who said in the cabinet meetings for former President Barack Obama, those were never this meticulously scripted. Now, more broadly, in response to our story and our reporting, the White House really defended the breadth of the president's travels, his engagements with the press, and certainly his record over the last 3.5 years, and provided comments from senior officials defending the president as being sharp and engaged. And White House spokesperson Andrew Bates also said this is a part of his response. He said Joe Biden has always said that it is fair for reporters to ask about his age and has always confidently shown his values, his agenda, intelligence, and determination to the American people. Well, in just a few hours, we are, of course, about to see that play out. The president taking questions from reporters, and we certainly expect many of those questions will be precisely about these issues.
All right, MJ Lee with that new reporting. Thank you so much for that. Let's go now to CNN's Kayla Tausche, who's at the NATO summit here in Washington. Kayla, all eyes turn now to this press conference this evening at NATO. What are you learning about how the president is preparing for his solo press conference?
Jessica, we got a glimpse of the president just a few minutes ago when he held a bilateral meeting with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. Each leader spoke. President Biden briefly. He appeared steely and serious as he pledged continued support for Ukraine and a desire to end the war as quickly as possible. The president, according to the pool, ignoring a question that was shouted from reporters about the future of his candidacy and whether he would answer those calls to step aside. But of course, that is the backdrop for this entire summit, an event that was supposed to celebrate the achievements that President Biden has said are a hallmark of his presidency of uniting and expanding this 75-year-old alliance and standing up to aggression overseas. Now the questions are about the president's own fitness and his capacity to continue serving in this leadership role in the United States and on the world stage. To that end, there have been many public proclamations of support for the president from from his national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, who said that the president simply had a bad night at the debate and said that world leaders had a drumbeat of praise for him here at the summit. The Finnish president in particular saying that after seeing the president this week, he has no doubts about his capacity. And then there is the campaign, which is coming out in response to many critics who have said if there is a path for President Biden to win re-election, then the campaign needs to disclose exactly what that is. And the campaign, to that effect, putting out a memo on that very topic that said that it was essentially a margin of error race in key battleground states. We maintain multiple pathways to 270 electoral votes. Right now, winning the blue wall, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania is the clearest pathway, although the campaign does acknowledge a deterioration in the polling, specifically that many Democratic voters or voters who are identified as Democrats have moved to undecideds, but the campaign suggested they could win those back. But that's coming as there are widespread concerns that perhaps many in the president's base or in the independent voters are too far gone and that they can't unsee what they saw on the debate stage. That's what we've heard from many lawmakers when they've been asked, can you hear anything from President Biden at this press conference that could change your mind? Many of those Democratic lawmakers who have already turned have told CNN no.
All right, Kayla Tausche, with that reporting from the NATO summit here in Washington, D.C. Thanks so much. And President Biden's every word and how he says it will be under intense scrutiny when he holds that news conference later this evening. With us now, CNN political director David Chalian. David, it goes without saying the president is under enormous pressure. We heard from the House Democratic leader says these conversations are not over. They're still ongoing about whether he should be the nominee or not. And we just heard Kayla's reporting from some Democrats that say there's nothing he can do tonight to change their mind.
Well, I think to some extent that is true. And it's what I'm hearing from Democrats as well, just that he could have a flawless press conference. That's not going to erase the concerns that he is in a position to defeat Donald Trump, which many Democrats believe he is not. Believe what 50 million Americans tuned in and saw at that debate is not recoverable. And that is the sentiment that is creating all this panic inside Democratic circles with members, with donors, and the like. I understand the Biden operation is trying to shut that down. But as you noted, Jessica, the fact that the Democratic leader in the House, he's not saying shut this down. He's saying this is an ongoing conversation. Nancy Pelosi is saying this is a decision that Joe Biden still needs to make, despite him saying he's made his decision. Those are senior Democratic leaders in the party telling the president they're not done discussing this yet.
One of the factors in the initial reporting about Biden deciding to stay in that might sway him had to do with polling. And we actually got a new poll from ABC News and the Washington Post, and it shows that Trump and Biden, at least nationally, are in a pretty close race, well within the margin of error.
Doesn't get closer than that.
Yeah, that's it.
So how do you read that poll in light of other polls in the context that we're getting that in battleground states, there's some slippage?
Well, first of all, it is true that I think in the totality of the national polling, if you compare pre-debate to post-debate, and you can see this when we average polls together in our poll of polls, there is a bit of difference. There has been some slippage, even nationally, if you average all the polls together for Biden pre-debate. Look here, our current poll of polls now, 49% for Donald Trump, 45% for Joe Biden. It was a little closer than that. I think it was 2-point spread, not a 4-point spread. But so a little bit of slippage for Biden nationally when you average the polls together. Certainly what we're hearing out of battleground states and in competitive House districts, not just in Senate races, is a concern about the president's numbers. And that's what Democrats are expressing to the White House. That 46-46 in today's poll, that is what Joe Biden and his team are going to point to, saying, guys, this has not changed the top line. It's the numbers underneath that, though, in that poll that they're not likely to tout. Two-thirds of Americans say he needs to step down as the candidate. A majority of Biden's supporters in that poll, say he should step down and not be the nominee. 54%, 62% of Democrats and Democratic leaners feel that way. So that you're not going to hear the Biden campaign tout. They're just going to tout the top line number.
And so many people have been calling on the campaign to say, okay, show us the way to 270. Show us the way you win. And we now have this memo obtained by our colleagues Betsy Klein and Arlette Saenz that says they are going to go through Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, that's the way they win. No surprise, right? But I thought more interestingly that they said, in this memo, they note that there's no indication that anyone else would outperform the president versus Trump. That seems to kind of be the push and pull here, too, is that Democrats don't have some silver bullet alternative right now.
And interesting about them saying there's no evidence, because we're now learning from the New York Times that they're actually looking to see if there might be evidence as they are testing Kamala Harris's strength against Donald Trump versus Joe Biden's strength against Donald Trump. You saw our poll last week shows her performing a bit better against Trump within the margin of error, but performing a bit better than Joe Biden is. I mean, here's the reality. Before the debate, Joe Biden's path to 270 was Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And that was really the clearest path, because we had already sort of assessed that Georgia was starting to lean away, Nevada was starting to lean away, these other Arizona's starting to lean away. And so that was the case before the debate, guys. He was already in a position that he had to sweep that so-called blue wall. That's only gotten harder since the debate in those states. And the fact that the campaign is trying to sell to Senate Democrats today, or publicly with this memo saying that is still our path, doesn't acknowledge the reality that that path became tougher. And I think what they have to convince Democrats of, that it's still truly a viable path.